Welcome to Daily English Stories. Every story hides a world. Some inspire, some haunt, some stay forever. Chapter 1. The Silent Shore. The bus rattled down the narrow, winding road, its windows smeared with the salty mist of the sea. Elena sat near the back, her forehead gently pressed against the glass. Her fingers, pale and restless, tapped silently on her knee. She wasn't running away, not exactly, but there was nothing left to hold her where she'd been. It had been 11 months since her brother's accident. 11 months since the phone call that split her life in two. In the city, everything reminded her of him. The hollow laughter of strangers, the sharp clink of coffee cups in cafes, the echo of his voice in songs that once played in his room. It was unbearable, so she left. The village of Kalen's Edge wasn't on most maps. It clung to the coastline like a forgotten secret, its cliffs sharp, its sky often bruised with clouds, the kind of place where the waves told more stories than the people did. Elena had rented a small cottage, no internet, barely a signal, just the sea, the wind, and enough silence to drown in. She arrived with a single suitcase, worn and weathered like her soul. The key was under the pot, just as promised in the email. No welcome committee, no neighbors peeking from windows, just the cry of gulls and the rhythmic sigh of the tide. She stepped inside. The air smelled of old wood, damp stone, and something faintly sweet. Lavender, maybe, or memory. That night the wind howled through the trees like something wild trying to get in. Elena lay awake, not from fear, but from the aching familiarity of loneliness. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was sharp, piercing. It crept through the cracks of the walls and settled into her chest. But morning brought light, and something else. She wandered down to the shore in boots, too thin for the cold. The sand was littered with shells, driftwood, and forgotten things, and then she saw it, movement near the rocks. At first, she thought it was a seal, but as she stepped closer, her breath caught. A dolphin, stranded, its sleek body slick with seawater, but still, too still. Elena froze. It should have frightened her, but it didn't. In fact, for the first time in months, she felt something. Not joy, not even hope, just awareness, the kind of still, quiet pull that comes before a choice is made. She dropped to her knees beside it. The dolphin's dark eye blinked slowly, as if watching her. Not panicked, not pleading, just waiting. She reached out, her fingers trembling slightly, and touched its side. Warm, alive, hurting. And suddenly, Elena, who hadn't touched another living soul in months, was cradling something more fragile than she'd known her heart could bear. She looked at the sky. It was pale blue now, almost kind. And in that moment she realized she couldn't save her brother. But maybe, just maybe, she could save this. Chapter 2. The Creature in the Surf. The sea had always been there, always roaring just beyond the cliffs like a restless god. But that morning it seemed different, softer, like it was holding its breath. Evelyn sat on the shore, her shoes abandoned somewhere in the grass, and the hem of her jeans soaked from saltwater spray. The arguments at home still echoed in her mind, her father's voice slamming against her thoughts like waves against rock. She had come here to disappear for a while, to let the ocean take the noise away. That's when she saw it. At first, she thought it was driftwood, a pale, smooth curve, breaking the surface of the shallows. But then it moved, slowly, painfully. The creature let out a soft, high-pitched cry that startled her out of her numbness. A dolphin. A young one, tangled in seaweed, one fin clearly injured, its body heaving with every breath like it was struggling just to stay alive. Evelyn froze. She'd seen dolphins in documentaries, sometimes in aquariums on school trips, but never like this. Not wild, not broken. Her instinct was to turn away. What did she know about marine animals? What if it bit her? What if it died right there and she couldn't do anything? But the dolphin didn't beg or thrash. It simply looked at her, one dark eye meeting hers, full of pain, full of trust. And something shifted inside her. She dropped her backpack and stepped into the water. The cold bit at her ankles and the sand sucked at her feet. Her fingers trembled as she gently untangled the seaweed caught around the creature's fin. Every movement was careful, every breath sharp with the fear of doing more harm. The dolphin whimpered again, and Evelyn murmured something she didn't even understand. Soft words, like a lullaby she hadn't known she remembered. It took time, more than she thought. Her hands ached, her knees went numb, and her clothes were soaked through. But she didn't stop, because in that strange, fragile connection, she saw something reflected. Herself, wounded, alone, trying to breathe through the pain. When the last knot of seaweed floated away and the dolphin finally moved, freer now, though still weak, it didn't swim off immediately. It lingered in the shallow surf, circling her once, almost like a silent thank you. Then, with one final flick of its tail, it disappeared into the deeper blue. Evelyn stood there, shivering and exhausted, but different. Something had cracked open in her, not loudly, not all at once, but enough. Enough to remind her that she wasn't powerless, that maybe, just maybe, she could still save something, even if she couldn't save everything. And as she walked back up the beach, her soaked shoes slung over one shoulder, she knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something she didn't yet understand. But she would return tomorrow. Chapter 3. The Bond Beyond Words. The days that followed were unlike anything Elena had ever known. Every morning she'd rise before the sun, slip into her worn sandals, and walk to the shore where the dolphin waited. Its silvery body would cut through the waves at the first sight of her, circling near the rocks, as if greeting an old friend. She still didn't fully understand what tied her to the creature, but she no longer questioned it. It was there, in the silence between words and the rhythm of the sea. The town, once a blur of indifference, began to notice the strange friendship blossoming on the coast. A few fishermen muttered about old tales, stories passed down from their grandfathers, of sea creatures who bonded with those carrying hidden wounds. Some said the dolphin was no ordinary animal, that it had been seen before during storms, guiding ships to safety, vanishing like a ghost beneath the waves once its work was done. Elena scoffed at the stories until she realized something was changing in her. Her thoughts felt clearer. The anger she once held so tightly at her father, at life, at herself, began to loosen. In the quiet hours beside the dolphin, she found space to think, to feel. She even began painting again, lines and colors that seemed to pour out of her faster than she could control them. Her canvases now spoke of motion, of water, of light. They were different from anything she had ever created. One evening, a woman from the village approached Elena as she sat sketching near the shore. Wrinkles lined her face like maps of time. "You remind me of your mother," the woman said gently. "She used to sit here too, said the sea spoke to her." Elena blinked, stunned. No one ever spoke of her mother. She barely remembered her. Only flashes of laughter, the scent of citrus, a song hummed at bedtime. "You knew her?" Elena asked quietly. "I did," the woman replied. "And I know grief. It doesn't leave. But sometimes the sea helps us carry it." That night, as the tide crept close and stars shimmered above, Elena stood at the edge of the shore, toes sunk into the cool sand. The dolphin surfaced, its eyes meeting hers. No words were spoken, none were needed. In that gaze, she saw understanding, even comfort. Not magic, not fantasy, but a bond built on silent witnessing, on being seen. In the weeks that followed, she noticed something else. People who had kept their distance now waved at her. Sophie, a quiet girl from the bakery, invited her for coffee. Mr. Dalton from the bookstore saved her a novel he thought she'd like. Lucas, the quiet man who ran the lighthouse, helped fix her bicycle chain when it snapped, asking nothing in return. The dolphin had not only opened her heart, but somehow quietly reopened her to the world. But in her heart, Elena knew such bonds could not last forever. The sea gives, and then it takes. It was only a matter of time before the waves would carry the creature back to wherever it had come from. And though she feared that moment, she also knew she would never again be the same girl who had arrived on this shore, angry, empty, and lost. Chapter 4. The Storm Within. The clouds rolled in without warning, thick, low, and hungry. The wind, once gentle, now pulled at Elena's hair like an angry hand, and the waves grew taller by the minute, crashing violently against the shore as if the sea had something to say. She stood barefoot on the wet sand, frozen not by the cold, but by a rising panic she hadn't felt in years. Out in the water, the dolphin struggled against the current. Its sleek body twisted in frantic attempts to stay close to shore, to stay near her. Elena's heart raced as she watched the creature she had once considered a mere inconvenience now caught in nature's fury. The pier behind her creaked under the pressure of wind and sea. Every instinct told her to run, to seek shelter, to save herself, but something else held her still, something deeper. Thunder cracked overhead like a forgotten memory breaking loose. And in that moment, Elena was no longer on the beach. She was back in the hospital room, fluorescent lights humming, her father lying in silence. The storm within her had never passed. She had left the city not to find peace, but to escape the grief she never allowed herself to feel. A cold wave slapped her ankles, dragging her back to the present. The dolphin called out, a high, distressed whistle. Without thinking, Elena waded into the surf. The water was ice against her skin, and each step forward was a battle. But she kept going. The dolphin thrashed in the shallows, its body weakening. She reached it, her hands trembling as she touched its side. The dolphin leaned into her, eyes wide with fear and trust. Elena guided it gently, whispering nonsense as if her voice could hold back the tide. The storm roared louder, and yet she felt calm. In saving the dolphin, she was saving the part of herself she had abandoned, brave, vulnerable, full of feeling. Together, they made it to a narrow inlet, protected by rocks and tall reeds. She collapsed beside the dolphin in the shallow pool, soaked, shivering, but alive. Lightning streaked across the sky, and for the first time in months, she let the tears come. Not the polite kind, not the ones you blink away. These were loud, gasping sobs. She cried for her father, for the lost time, for the guilt that had chained her heart. And the dolphin, as if understanding, stayed by her side. That night, Elena didn't return to the cottage. She stayed with the creature, wrapped in an old blanket she found among the reeds, her hand resting on the dolphin's back. The storm eventually passed, but something had shifted. In the eye of chaos, she had found a strange kind of peace. The sea had forced her to remember, but in that remembering, it had also given her something new, a bond that didn't need language, and a second chance to feel without fear. Chapter 5. The Goodbye and the Gift. The beach was quiet that morning, as if the sea itself held its breath. Elena stood barefoot in the sand, the rising sun casting a soft amber glow across the water. The dolphin had recovered, stronger now, playful even. But something had changed. It kept swimming to the edge of the surf, pausing, then circling back to her as if it too felt the weight of an approaching goodbye. She didn't want to let go, but deep inside, she knew the ocean was its home, not hers. Kneeling in the shallows, Elena whispered a wordless thank you. The dolphin chirped, brushing gently against her fingertips, then turned and swam toward the horizon. She stood there, eyes locked on the trail it left behind, until it vanished beneath the waves. A part of her left with it, but something else stayed. That night, Elena dreamt of the deep, of light shimmering beneath the surface, of laughter that sounded like her brother's, carried on waves. And when she awoke, the grief that had once gripped her so tightly felt quieter, not gone, but no longer unbearable. She returned to the world not as the girl who had run away, but as the woman who had faced the storm and listened to the silence. The townspeople noticed. Children she once ignored now ran to her for stories. Older women offered nods of quiet respect, and near the old fisherman's dock, someone had carved into the wood, "You are not lost. You are becoming." No one knew who had written it, but Elena felt the message deep in her bones. It was her brother's voice, his gift. She no longer needed answers, only the memory of a dolphin who had come into her life like a tide and left her changed. Not everyone believed her story, but the ones who did stood by the shore in silence from time to time, hoping the waves might bring something unexpected, something wild, something healing. Elena didn't need to see the dolphin again to know it had mattered. Some goodbyes aren't endings. They're beginnings in disguise.